bass.
Welcome back to the next part of this Truth and Rhythm episode. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. Also become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you so much for your interest and support. Enjoy. I am pleased to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership drummer Stanton Moore, a founding member of the fantastic New Orleans-based funk jazz jam band Galactic. With influences like the Meters and the JBs, since 1994, Galactic has released 10 studio albums and established itself as one of this millennium's most authentic funk-oriented groups. A precision act on stage, the band has continued to challenge itself and listeners by incorporating traditional and progressive electronic and rap elements into its musical lexicon. A creatively restless spirit, Stanton has embodied his name by always seeking to do more through his rhythmic gifts. That is manifested in several solo as well as ongoing and one-off band projects, along with dozens of session calls and countless performances. In 2017, having done instructional books and videos, he established the Stanton Moore Drum Academy. Stanton, how are you doing?
Great. Good to see you, Scott.
Good to see you too. Thank you for joining the show. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So are you at home today? Where are you?
I am. I'm at home. I'm currently in my office, and you can see, as you commented a little earlier, there's one of my little practice kits that I keep in here. And it's got quiet heads and quiet cymbals, so I can play at any time, because now my wife is working from home a lot since the pandemic. So I can sit back there and work out any ideas I might get. And then, I can stay up here and do what I need to do business-wise, email-wise, writing-wise. I write a lot of lessons for my drum academy. And then I can just slip over there, and I don't have to worry if she's on a Zoom or anything like that. I can just play on the quiet drums anytime I need to.
Got it worked out. So are you in New Orleans proper, or where are you located?
I am. So we live in the Garden District, right next to the Lower Garden District. So we are in the Uptown area, and I could walk to Tipitina's if I needed to, and I do sometimes. But yeah, pretty much, walking distance to downtown, walking distance to Tips. And we have a studio that is located in between my house and Tips. So I go there a lot. And I've got a couple of kits set up at all times there, so I can really lay into stuff if I need to there. And that's also where I film all of my drum academy lessons. And then I can also record there. So I have a few different clients that I'm recording different tracks for.
Nice. Well, I've been a fan going back to the first Galactic record. And, I know you guys gigged a lot before that too. And Robert has been on the show. I don't know if you knew that, but your partner in rhythm, so yeah, enjoyed him. And I saw you, the last time I saw you guys was actually right before the pandemic, the One Nation tour with George Clinton. I caught that show in Greensboro, since I'm in North Carolina, and, missed seeing you guys ever since then. So hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, very cool.
And then before that, when I lived in Los Angeles, I got to see your trio at the Mint, so that was very cool too.
Yeah, love the Mint. I've done a lot at the Mint over the years, and I had a weekly there on Wednesdays in July, 3 years in a row. So I was spending some time there and then flying in and out of there for the summer festival gigs. But yeah, I love the Mint.
Yeah, I miss it. I got to tell you, I miss a lot of those clubs out there for sure, but that one's right at the top.
Yeah.
So Stanton, growing up in New Orleans with, that in your blood and that environment, could you not have gotten into music? I mean, what drove you to it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I can remember going to Mardi Gras parades as a kid. And I mean, talking about, starting around 8 months old or so, going to Mardi Gras parades and then really being impacted by the drums coming down the street, especially, by the age of 3, 4, and then by the ages of 5 and 6, just wanting to hit on everything in the house. So, hitting on pots and pans, hitting on Rubbermaid containers, mixing bowls. And so I was just drawn to it because of the energy of the marching bands coming down the street in the Mardi Gras parades. So I just could tell that I wanted to pursue drumming, music, hitting stuff. And my parents let me take piano lessons when I was about 7 or 8. And then I started joining the school band and all that around 9 or 10 and got my first kit. I think it was at the age of 12 when I got my first kit. And then from there, it was just drums every day.
And were you like attracted to all genres, or were there a couple that you were really, tuned into?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, being that age, at the age of around 14, 15, I started getting into classic rock, all things Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, The Who, all kinds of stuff like that. And around that time, I also started going to some of the punk rock shows in New Orleans. And so I was drawn to a lot of that at first. And then around the age of 16, 17, started getting exposed to records by The Meters and John Coltrane, and started really kind of, I'd already been into Led Zeppelin. So, to reference the shirt that you're wearing, I was very into John Bonham at an early age, age of teenager. But then around 16, 17, started getting into Ziggy Released and Elvin Jones from hearing The Meters and John Coltrane. So to this day, my holy trinity is still really Ziggy Released, John Bonham, and Elvin Jones. And I, not necessarily specifically or note-wise, do I try to model my playing after those guys all the time, but those guys are huge influences on me. And I tried to more emote in the way that those guys do, or convey emotional energy in the way that those guys do. Like those 3 drummers always had a really strong emotional connection to me. So I would, I want to impact people in a way that those 3 drummers impact me.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you picked up a stick for the first time, did you realize that the Meters were local?
So in a way, just in that we had this Mardi Gras compilation at the time, and my dad would play that record all the time. And it was vinyl back then. And I forget what year it came out, but it was probably the late 70s. And so it was on this record were some of the Professor Longhair tunes and some of the Wild Magnolia tunes and the Meters, stuff like Hey Pocky Way. And so I was hearing that, but I was not necessarily, so I assumed all that music was from New Orleans, but then I was not aware of all the instrumental Meters songs and all of the vast body of work that they had created. So in a way, I knew that the music that I was hearing at Mardi Gras and all the Mardi Gras tunes were from New Orleans, but then I wasn't aware of the deeper the deeper catalog that these guys had created, and especially all the stuff that they played on from other people, and then how important and how cool that was because of them being from New Orleans and being influential, yes, but then also all of the work that they did with so many other people that was influential. And then it's really deep once you start realizing in the 90s, 20 years after their heyday, all the music of theirs that got sampled for a lot of the hip hop that came out in the 90s. So they were influential on different levels at different points in their career, which is so very cool. You know, them being the band that played on records with Robert Palmer, or some of the stuff with LaBelle, or maybe some of what they did backing up, you know, some of the other artists that came through town and would have them play. So what they did was, sure, they're from New Orleans, but it reached so many different genres, different people, different artists, different communities, different cultures because of what they were doing. And sometimes they might not have even been aware that their music was used on a hip hop tune that wound up becoming a hit. They might not have even realized that for a couple of years and then realize, oh, that's us on that hit. They might owe us a little something on that.
Who did you first see that kind of blew your mind at a young age?
So, two guys in particular, and both around the same time, both around within a few months of each other. And that would be Johnny Vodakovich and his very unique, very, very interactive and very free, very loose style. And I was just like, wow, I didn't realize you could play the drums in that way. And then right around the same time, I think I was 17 when both of these happened, and then seeing Russell Baptiste, who was just an absolute raw force of nature. And he was playing with George Porter Jr. and the Meters at that time. So I would go see him often and hang with him, and you know, I would move his drums and set up his drums. And so Russell just really blew my mind at the age of 17. And then so did Johnny Vodakovich. And two polar opposite types of players.
Were any of them, any those guys or any other guys in a similar fashion, sort of mentors at all?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Johnny, for sure. And then, you know, Russell definitely took me under his wing and would let me follow him around and sit in. And sometimes I was sitting in places where I had no business being, but Russell would vouch for me and be like, he's with me, you know, don't mess with him. So the experience of getting to hear some of that music and sitting in, being put in the hot seat, that really helped me strive to be better than I was at that time. So in completely different ways, I would say that, you know, Johnny and Russell were very nurturing, and beyond being influential, yes, you know, they were mentoring me in different ways, and sometimes in what I should do and sometimes in what I should not do.
Yeah. And that trial by fire, you can't beat that.
Yeah.
Was it mainly their influence or other influences that kind of drove you more towards groove-based music as opposed to some of the rock that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. So it was really just the emotional connection that I felt from the music that I was hearing from Johnny Vodakovich, Russell Baptiste, of course, all the Meters stuff. Of course, whenever I would see Herlin Riley or Shannon Powell. And of course, at that time, I was able to go out in New Orleans and see Brian Blade who was just an unbelievable, meteoric development of his talent. Like I saw him when I was still in high school and he was at Loyola, and I was just like, oh my God, like he was light years ahead of me musically. And so I remember seeing him when I was still in high school and just being like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then watching him develop over the next couple of years. And it was just, his development musically, artistically, emotionally. And it was just, it was just like watching a rocket take off, watching him develop. You would see him and then, a week later you'd see him again. And it was just like, he was just getting better in quantum leaps from week to week. It was just incredible to watch.
At what point did you think, you know what, I'm going to make a go of this being my career?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I was, just starting to play. I might have been, I don't know, still hadn't had my first drum set yet, maybe. When I was like, I want to be a drummer because, I figured, well, I won't have to have an office job, nothing against office jobs, but I was like, I want to be able to play drums, travel. I was an altar boy when I was younger, and I used to have to wake up for 6:30 mass. So we would have to wake up at like 5 something a.m. So I was like, whatever I do for a job in my life, I don't want to have to wake up early. Now, little did I know that I was going to have to wake up early and catch early flights often, and often after having played late at night the night before. So I had reasons I wanted to become a professional drummer. Some of them I did not realize I was going to, have to work really incredibly hard and also sometimes play late and wake up early. So, but I decided when I was pretty young that I wanted to play for a living and that's what I wanted to do with my life.
What was your balance like early on in terms of being, just into playing and being sort of a gearhead with it?
Yeah, I think, I'm not too much of a gearhead. I love drums and I have lots of drums, but I don't really obsess over the gear too much. I get into it a good bit, but I think I have a healthy balance. Some guys, are way, way into the gear aspect of things. And then some guys don't pay attention to the gear at all. So for me, the way that I would consider myself, my relationship to gear is more that I want everything functioning. I want everything sounding good. I don't have to have like brand new hardware all the time, as long as everything's working, right? And then, so I like to make sure that everything is maintained, everything is functioning, and nothing's falling apart. And then, some of my buddies, they get up there and they're just all about the music. They're all about the energy of the connection between the music and the individual and the band and the audience. And they don't care if their gear is falling apart, right? But for me, of course, I'm aware of the music, the connection between the individuals and the band, and then that connection with the audience. But I don't want my gear or my kit to be falling apart while I'm making those connections. Because to me, that starts to distract from what you're doing. So, I do put some effort into making sure that everything's working so that it doesn't detract or distract from what I'm trying to do musically.
Mm-hmm. Stanton, what was your first time in a studio, like really doing some professional type recording?
I would think that was probably when I recorded a demo with a band I had called Captain Meathead. And it was myself and Scott Guyon on guitar and Peter Barnes on bass. And Scott Guyon has gone on to become the 3-time Jazz Fest poster artist. So for the years 2020, the year that didn't happen, and let's see, the 50th was the 50th anniversary. So he did the 50th and then the next two. So, and he did a wonderful job on all three of those. And so he was playing guitar and singing in this band. And we went into a studio and, put our money together and went and recorded 5 or 6 tunes with our band that we called Captain Meathead at the time. That was my first studio experience.
What year do you think that was?
That was probably 1990, 89 or 90.
Wow, it's going way back.
Yeah. Yeah, that was either 89 or 90.
And when were the first stirrings of what would turn into Galactic?
Yeah, so I was in the Loyola jazz department, right? And I was playing drums, trying to get my degree. And there was a guitar player named Rob Gowan, and he was in that department as well. And so sometimes we just wanted to blow off steam. And so I said, hey, man, I've met this bass player who's really cool. He loves meters and P-Funk and James Brown. Do you want to get together and come jam at my house? So that bass player was Robert Mercurio. And so that was 1992. And then I bumped into Robert Mercurio, I believe, at Tipitina's shortly thereafter. And he said, hey, this is my friend Jeff, and he plays guitar in that band I was telling you about. We have a band. So they had a band together since they were 12 years old. They grew up down the street from each other and knew each other since the 2nd grade. And they grew up down the street in Chevy Chase, Maryland. They moved to New Orleans, and they were trying out some different drummers, but they had a band called Galactic Prophylactic. And they asked me when I met them, and I believe at Tips, when I bumped into Robert, he said, man, we know you're busy. You're probably too busy. Because I was already playing gigs with a bunch of different bands and playing on the casinos and stuff like that. And the casino riverboats. And so Robert said, you might be too busy, but do you know any drummers who might want to come play some funk with us? I said, well, I want to play funk. And so I went and did some rehearsals at their house on Magazine Street in late 1992. And then in 93, we started playing gigs together as Galactic Prophylactic.
Do you have any specific memories about like the early stage act that you guys had?
Oh, yeah. We had a very energetic singer by the name of Chris Lane. And Chris Lane is now in comedy, and he's wonderful. He's brilliant. He's funny. And so he would, jump all over the stage, and he was super energetic. But, he would tell you himself he was not much of a vocalist and was more of a front man. And we had decided we wanted to kind of focus more on, trying to get a little more serious with what we were doing. So we kind of regrouped a little bit and then came back together in, I believe, 95. we recorded a record in 95 and released it in 96 and started touring, played our first Jazz Fest and started touring as Galactic. That's right. That's the record, Cooling Off. And it came out in 96 and we started touring it in 96, played our first Jazz Fest. And that first year we played, I don't know, in between, we played a whole bunch of gigs and then started averaging, I think there was one year we did close to 200 gigs and it started averaging, 150 gigs for years. But up until COVID, there was a 25-year run that averaged about 100 gigs a year for 25 years.
Wow. Thousands of gigs. Literally. Wow. What did you feel like the aspirations or ambition was of the group and yourself back then? Did you think, you want to get famous at all? You just want to play what feels good? You just want to make enough to make an okay living? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I decided around the age of 17 and told my buddy Scott Guyon that I wanted to be one of the best drummers I could possibly be, right? And hopefully become one of the best drummers in the world and strive to do that. And so for me, I worked towards that and, practiced a lot and studied with some great teachers with, Johnny Vodakovich, hung out a lot with Russell Baptiste. I had already studied with Marty Hurley and got my rudimental stuff together. And then, studied with Herlin Riley a little, and then just started getting together with as many great drummers as I could and just really trying to get better by constantly learning, right? And then eventually wound up, after we've been touring for a long time, I would go take lessons with Kenny Washington, great jazz drummer in New York. And so I was just always trying to get better and always trying to improve. And then with with Galactic, with the band, of course, some of our goals were we wanted to play larger venues and eventually get to where we could headline Red Rocks, which we did. We've played Red Rocks many, many times, but we've gotten to where we've headlined it a couple times. And that was, really wonderful, and of course, put out some of the best records that we can. And then, some of the guys admittedly would want to play with the band and not have people know who they are. And, they would admit that fame is not something that they want to pursue. Whereas, for me, of course, I want to be well known as the best drummer that I can possibly be, but I realized that, not everybody in the band has the same aspirations.
So as you went along in your journey with Galactic, I don't know if you had to put like a percentage on it with that first record in the mid 90s, where was your skill level and your accomplishment behind the kit, would you say, compared to where it got 5 or 10 years from then?
Yeah, pretty low. I would like to think that I've improved a great deal from our first efforts. And what I'm really focused on is that, the next 10 years, I made 51. So now I'm going to my studio and trying to practice 2 and 3 hours at a time, multiple times a week. So I want to be even better by the time I'm 60 something, right? So that's what I'm focused on, is trying to be the best that I possibly can be by the time I'm in my 60s. So, working on all of that right now and really enjoying it, and I feel like I'm proud of where we've been able to get with the business side of things. I'm proud of what we've accomplished with being able to pool our resources and become the current caretakers of Tipitinas. And, really, I want to be proud of where I'm at musically 10 years from now, and so, I am proud of some of the music that we've been able to create. And then I want to be even prouder of where I'm at in 10 years.
Well, I was very impressed with some of the progression Galactic just did as a band. I mean, you guys pushed the envelope in a lot of ways. And I know that it alienated maybe some of the core, but I mean, Ruckus is like one of my favorites. And you guys definitely had a big departure on that, but it worked. It was cool stuff,
Thank you. Yeah. And, I really appreciate you saying that. And I don't think it's healthy for a band to stay locked in to one artistic vision. I think that it was healthy for us to grow and to challenge ourselves and to take chances, take risks, and, you mentioned that record, and then, I think we may have alienated some more people from the corner to the block, but then some people love that record, and we really had a great time touring that record and, playing with Charlie Tuna and Boots Riley and Lyrics Born. We toured a lot with those guys. And, I know because people told us, that it was a little bit too much of a left turn for them. But then for some people, they really loved it. And now, we might get Charlie Tuna as a guest or Lyrics Born as a guest or Boots Riley as a guest. And, we don't have to do it like a whole set of it, or we don't have to do it for months on end. But we learned so much and we developed so much as a band from doing that record. And then, doing all the records that we've done, and getting to work with artists like Alan Toussaint and Irma Thomas and, Mavis Staples and Macy Gray, I mean, Corey Glover, Cyril and Neville. It's like we've been very fortunate, very blessed, and very, rich, really, in the artists that we've been able to work with, And there's a huge amount of learning that we've been able to do by working with some of these artists. And, if we had decided, we're just going to be an instrumental funk band and we're just going to do this, right? Then I don't think we would have learned or grown as much as we have.
Speaking a little bit more to that, Stanton, how would you describe the chemistry or dynamic among the members within Galactic? When you're brainstorming creatively for something, one of these kind of projects, what's the give and take like, and how do you bring something to fruition together?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And what's really cool is that, you've got guys in the band like Ben Elman. Ben is always seeking out new music and seeking out new artists and sometimes bringing that back to us for us to check out. And, he was really checking out the New Orleans bounce stuff and checking out Big Frida and Katie Red and, brought them to us. And then we did songs with Cheeky Black and Katie Red and Big Frida. And that really helped us go in directions that we would have never gone in, And then Ben will also, he'll be into some Balkan brass band stuff, and bring that to us. And we wind up doing, some Balkan influenced funk, where the horn melodies are obviously coming from Eastern European influenced music, right? And so, it's just specifically some of the stuff that Ben will bring in. I might be trying to bring in different influences from different things that I've done, and then coming up with different grooves and then throwing that into what we do, you know? So we all kind of bring in different elements from different areas and then could, bring that in to kind of help us move in directions that we may have not been headed in before.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, you and Robert have been playing together so long, what's it like when you guys lock in and hit that pocket,
Yeah, it's great. I mean, groove wise, when Robert and I play together and it's locked because we've been playing together for so long, it's very comfortable, right? So, and we just know each other so well, and then there are sometimes where, one of us might be feeling something in a slightly different place, and then we'll talk about it, and then we'll work on it to get it to where it feels where we're locked. And we're really always trying to accomplish that lock where especially him and I are just really super, together. And if we feel like, if we come off stage and we're like, yeah, that one didn't really quite sit right. And then we talk about how we can do that, So, just for anybody who might be interested, what I do before we start a tune is I sing a part of that tune, and it might be the chorus, or it might be one specific vocal part at the end of the verse. It depends, on the song, or it might be a horn line if it's an instrumental thing. And then I may also, sometimes I have a metronome on my left, and I used to sometimes play to a click, but now we don't play the click at all. And then I may look at the blinking light of the metronome while I'm singing that specific part of the tune that I just said. And then I don't look at it. And then I go off of the feel of what I'm singing. But I might look at that blinking light to make sure that it's in the ballpark. And then sometimes we might want to play something with a little bit more of an edge. Sometimes we might want to lay it back a little bit. But I try not to get married to that click. I try to go more off of what I'm feeling musically based off of where I'm singing that melody, or where I'm singing that horn line, or that one hook in the chorus. And I might use that blinking light just to make sure that, okay, yeah, this is where it should be. Because if you're using a couple of reference points, singing the melody or the horn line and looking at that blinking light, and sometimes I'll look at somebody, I'll know Robert's tapping something out, and I'll look at where he's tapping it out. And if we start something and I look at Jelly and I can tell she wants it to sit a little bit, I might just bring it back just a little bit. And you want to get it to where these adjustments are imperceivable to the audience. But it's such fine tuning that it's almost imperceivable.
Yeah, except for little tweaks like that can make so much difference in how you really feel it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And if something's a little too quick and you can tell that the vocalist wishes that it was, held back, and then it could not be as good as it could be that day. So, getting the right tempo, getting the right feel, getting the right groove, finding the right pocket for the tune is very important to me.
And we talk about in funk, of course, how, the silence and the gaps are as important as anything else.
Oh yeah.
The
space in between the notes is what creates the pocket and creates the groove.
So for you, when you're creating that, how innate is it versus intellectual to augment, what you're doing with the pocket, pulling it this way or that way?
Yeah. And what was the word how innate?
Innate versus intellectualized.
Yeah. You want to get it to a point where it's innate, where it's feel, and then you also, just through repetition, you want to get it to where when you start a tune, even if you're, sometimes we may have flown early that morning. We may have had a 6 a.m. flight, which means you got to wake up around 3 a.m. And then we've been traveling, you might have to fly from New Orleans, have a layover somewhere, maybe Dallas or Denver, and then you land in Portland, and then you drive 2 hours to the festival, right? This happens all the time. And then the tempos then, after you've been traveling for 8-10 hours, whatever it is, and you haven't even checked into your hotel and you're on stage, the tempos then are going to be different than, if you fly in somewhere the day before, have everybody's got a full night to sleep, and then you wake up and then all you got to do is drive 10 minutes to the festival site. And then everybody's been able to have coffee and you're playing at 6 p.m. as opposed to midnight. So the tempos are going to be different. And so you want it to be based off of how you're feeling. And then hopefully innately you can tune into how everybody else is feeling too. And you want to feel that as much as you can as a cohesive unit that is also aware of where the vocalist is feeling it. Because if we're in altitude and you try to count something off, and the vocalist is having trouble taking breaths in between the lines of the verse, that's gonna be no bueno, So you got to be aware of that too. So I try to watch, Jelly like a hawk. And Jelly will be like, she might look back and be like, and she'll do it, behind her back, just like that, right? To where you won't even see it. Like, just like that. Not like, oh, just she'll be like that, just a hair, to where I might just back it up just a hair. And then Ivan Neville playing with Dragon Smoke, he does this thing where he rolls his it's like, okay, well, where you're feeling the tempo here, 2, 3, 4, or here, that, and so you also got to watch his foot. And then you might start to think, and you're like, you nailed the tempo where he's at. But then he starts singing, and he's like, he realizes, nope, he needs it to be back a little bit. And that doesn't mean that I didn't nail where he was. It means that he started singing it, and he realized he needs more space to take breaths, right? And so, all this stuff comes from experience, but for me, if I'm playing with Galactic, I'm looking this way, watching Jelly, and she'll turn around, when she can, and come visit me, and be like, oh, it feels great. It's awesome. If it's a solo or an instrumental part in a tune. And then, but with Ivan, he's behind the organ. So he can't come to me. So I really got to be watching that shoulder and watching him tap his foot, because I can't go to him and he can't come to me. So it's a different thing. But in both situations, I'm watching the singer, I'm watching the vocalist like a hawk.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.